Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Friends of Pope Farm Conservancy Zoom presentation on Native American spirituality. I'm really pleased that we can do this today. We have been planning this presentation for years, and a couple of times we had to cancel it because of bad weather because we were going to be out at the Conservancy. So here we are on Zoom, and we are pleased to bring this to you today. I'd like to talk just for a couple minutes about our format today. We would like you to mute yourselves and also turn off your cameras. What we've discovered is that if you turn off your camera, the bandwidth is better and you'll be able to hear the speaker better. We are going to be taking questions, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to have you use the chat box. And you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. And you just click on the chat box, enter your question. I'll be collecting the questions, and either during the presentation or at the end of the presentation, we will turn the questions over to our presenter so that we can answer them. What I would like to do at this point is just let you know that the Friends of Pope Farm Conservancy would love to have you come out to the Conservancy. We're open every day of the year. It's located in the town of Middleton. It's just a beautiful location. There are over 100 acres with 7 miles of hiking trails. There are prairies, magnificent views. There's just lots to see. And I find it to be a real place of serenity during these turbulent times. So I invite you to come out to the Conservancy. Also, if you're interested in finding out how to join, how to become one of the friends, go to our website, which is the Friends of Pope Farm Conservancy.com. And you'll find lots of information and also be able to join and become a member if you're interested. Okay, at this point, I would like to turn it over to Sharon, who will introduce our presenter. Sharon?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're so very happy today to welcome Dr. Catherine Heskin, who will speak to us on Native American spirituality and what it can teach us in these times about care of the earth. It had been our intent to have Kathy speak from the top of Pope Farm, looking out over Lake Mendota and all the surrounding land on which Native Americans lived not so many years ago. But I hope you'll see it in your mind's eye as she speaks, because the intent of our program today, in the midst of climate crisis, is to remind us that early inhabitants here regarded land as sacred and took care to preserve it. Kathy, who is currently living in Lodi, but I just found out is moving to Middleton, is a part of the Navajo people, as well as the Lumbee and Anishinaabe, I believe it's pronounced, you can correct me. She holds a doctorate degree in ministry and teaches Native American spirituality at Edgewood College. Since 2013, she's been a retired professor of theology at Dominican University, where she taught Native studies for 17 years. She's also worked with the American Indian Center in Chicago and currently is involved with Indian efforts to protect northern Wisconsin waters. And with that, I welcome Kathy.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. I'll introduce myself as you do when you begin anything. Bujuanin, hello friends. My name is Cathy Heskin, Indigenous Baswewe Kwe, Jijak Nindodum, Anishinaabe, Lumbee, Diné, and Irish, which in Anishinaabe means resounding echo woman. That is my name. A Crane clan, and my ancestors are Anishinaabe, Lumbee, and Diné, as well as a bunch of Irish got in there too. I am a Catholic theologian, and as you were saying, Sharon, I've taught Native American spirituality now for the past 25 years. And the way I got to do it was a very backdoor, interesting journey, if you would like to hear it. Our son, Tom, actually, who's here now helping us pack our house because we're leaving tomorrow morning at 8. Our son, Tom, was a student at Dominican when I was teaching. And he was a wonderful, wonderful person, but a little bit wild. When I first started teaching, he had a purple ponytail and was always into a little bit of trouble. And Sister Lori Brink, who was teaching in the theology department, loved him. She thought he was amazing. So she created a trip to Montana so that he could experience Native spirituality and a whole other way of life. And he was gone for 2 weeks. I never heard from him. And when he came home, it was astounding. He was like a new person. He was happy. He was peaceful. All the things that he had been doing, he just he's still the same person, but he changed. And the next year he was her intern, and the third year he helped her teach the course. And then she was transferred. And she came to me and she said, "Kathy, please take this course. We would like to have continue in the department, and I think you should teach it." And I said, "Absolutely, yes," because I wanted other students to have that opportunity that Tom had had. I'd never met an Indian. I'd only read a few books years ago. I had never driven west of Minneapolis by myself, and I'd never put a tent up because we have 3 sons and I have a husband, and I never had to do that part of the trip. But it didn't matter. It was what I needed to do, and it changed my whole life. I came back a new person. So I taught this course for about 7 years, loving it, learning every day. But I got thyroid cancer, and I wrote to the adoption agency. I'm adopted. I wrote to the adoption agency where I came from to ask if they had any medical history. And no, they did not. But they sent me my history, and it turns out I'm Native American. And Neil for Christmas my husband Neil, gave me a DNA test. And when I got that, I realized not only was I a little bit Native American, but I was really a lot Native American. Finding out my background changed my life because I had approached Native spirituality as a visitor. And I was very careful because it is the dominant culture way to see something they like and grab it. And so a lot of Natives have lost their traditions to people, and people have thought they could buy pipes, and people have thought they should do this and that, do ceremonies that perhaps they shouldn't do. And so I was always very careful. But once once my friends found out I was Native American, I got initiated, if you will. One of my really good friends that I had traveled with, he is a pipe carver, and he carved me a pipe and gave it to me at my naming ceremony. When I received my name, Baswewekwe, resounding echo woman, and then I received the pipe. And it was a very powerful moment, a very humbling moment for me. I was reluctant to use it at first because I know that the responsibility of a pipe carrier is to care for the people, and I didn't see how I was doing that. I wasn't living on a reservation. I wasn't, all I was doing was teaching. And in fact, his name is Star, and I spoke to Star and I told him how I felt. And he said, "You know, you do care for the people because you teach the truth about Native people, and somebody has to do that. So that is in fact caring." And I asked him further about my name. And I said, is it because I talk so much, you know, resounding echo woman? And he said, no. He said, you are a teacher. And when your spirit walks, your words will live after you. So choose your words very carefully. I thought it was an amazing lesson. And I've been a lot more careful ever since. I was adopted as a baby, as I said, and I was not raised in any traditional Native way. My adopted family didn't even care about the environment, and so I never learned those things as a child. I have had to learn those things as an adult, but I've had great teachers. I've had people who've helped me and who have been gentle with me about learning. In my studies and in my friendships, I have learned a lot about Native spirituality, and I've learned that there are few universals for Native people. At first contact, there were 500, over 500, 550 individual sovereign nations living on what we now call North America. And each nation had a different language, different practices. Each of them had a very different creation stories. In fact, right now in my class at Edgewood, we're doing creation stories, and the students have had a great time researching their tribe and telling us about their tribe's story and rituals and locations and so forth. But each one of them had different understandings of the earth based on climate, based on abundance, or based on scarcity of resources, but every one of them understood the earth as mother. And when they talk about, when the settlers would talk about selling land, Native people could not understand that as a concept because you can't sell your mother, or at least you shouldn't. So we've had to adjust to a whole different way of thinking. One constant for all Native peoples, though there are very different things for all different groups, one constant is that we are all related. The humans, the four-leggeds, the winged ones, the swimmers, the plants, the rocks, the trees, we are all related to one another. We are a community of beings, each belonging to the other, each dependent on the other, and each of us has a spirit. And although there are a few universals, all Native persons lived in harmony with the earth, lived off the land. Their spirituality was based on respect and reverence for the earth and all creation. The seasons, the elements, all the different ways of knowing were learned by observing. And for Native people, there's no distinction between the physical and spiritual realms. And I think most importantly, particularly in our culture today, Native people have a gift economy. They understand everything is a gift. Everything that we receive, everything that we see, everything that we experience is a gift. And that's a real clash with the consumer economy that we live in today. And in many ways, these last months of being quarantined have given me more of an appreciation of a gift economy, because we need to just observe and take time and learn from the land how we can live better. When talking about Native American spirituality, it's important to remember that every tribe had different rituals, every tribe had different customs and language, and they were unique in their sovereignty. They were unique in the way they lived on the land. It's important to remember too that there is no word for religion in any Native language. The spiritual path is how you live. It's your virtues. It's your ability to express gratitude. You can't generalize, but some things are constant. Honesty, respect, courage, those are universal values. And listening is very important. Children were taught to listen. I've taken students to reservations all over the country, and one of the things that they've observed is when an elder is talking, the children sit quietly and listen. The native children, my students, wiggle and are very, very antsy for this person to hurry up and get to the point so we can go outside and do something. But that's not how native children respond to the teaching of an elder. Listening is very important, and the Anishinaabe have a saying, listen and you will hear the patterns of life. And we know that for Native people, oral tradition is the way there is passing on of the culture, of the wisdom, and of the ways of the people. It's usually done by elders. In most of the cultures, grandparents are the teachers, which is nice for me because I'm a grandma, and I love telling stories to my grandchildren. Two of the girls always ask me to tell the creation story about the turtle. And that story is told in many cultures, but for the Anishinaabe, there was a flood. Nanabuju climbed to the highest hill, to the highest tree, and had a log and kept the other animals, I'm doing this quickly, kept the other animals alive by taking turns on the log. And they sent the divers down to get a little bit of earth so they could start the land again. And all of the loons and the diving birds, the great auk, they all dove and were not successful. And then the otter and the other diving animals, they went down. They didn't do very well. They couldn't hold their breath far enough. A couple of them could see the dirt, but they couldn't get to it. And then the little muskrat said, I'll go. And everybody laughed because the muskrat was the least of the animals and they knew he couldn't do it, but he did. And he dove and he was gone a long, long time. And finally, his little body floated to the surface, but in his paw, he had some sand. And they took it and the turtle came and said, put it on my back and I will grow. And she did. And so if you look at North America, you can sort of see that it looks like Turtle Island. And that is the quick story. If I were telling you the whole story, it would take 3 days, but I don't think we have time for that. But the creation story for the Anishinaabe is shared a little bit with other tribes because there were trade routes and there were travel routes and people got to know each other and shared their stories with one another. So teaching is always done in a circle. And children are taught to learn by the stories in the circle, through their dreams. If you had an important dream, you told an elder and the elder would help you to understand it. And by observing nature. Nature has a lot to teach us if we pay attention to it. The way the animals ate plants, used plants for medicines if they were unwell. The native people learned from that. How the animals behaved. The wolf was the animal that taught us how to be family, which is an interesting piece. Wolves are always in a pack. Everybody takes care of everybody else's children. And when they travel, they form a line with the oldest and the weakest first to set the pace. They are followed by the strongest, and the line follows at the pace of the slowest and the sick, which is very different from the way our culture treats the elders. Decision-making is done in a circle. No voice is considered more important than another, and everybody's entitled to their say. We don't have that as a cultural practice too much anymore. I always say we learned how to argue from Jerry Springer in this country, and unfortunately that's how arguments are carried on. But if we paid attention to the people who were here before us, we might have learned a different way. Even the smallest children's opinions are respected. And every decision is made for the 7th generation. It is important to consider the children of the future when you are talking about land or water or tradition. The 7th generation is your grandchildren's grandchildren. And in our culture, we have a very different way of decision making. Often it's how will it affect me? And that is not the Native way. Rituals that honor the circle of life, and many tribes and bands have a medicine wheel, which speaks to the 4 elements: water, black; air, yellow; earth, red; and fire, white. Some groups have blue or black, and others have different ways of doing that. But it's always circular, and the 4 colors represent the 4 directions. And to many, it's known as the sacred hoop. That is a tradition among many bands, and the belief is that the sacred hoop was broken with the massacre at Wounded Knee, but that the sacred hoop is being repaired now by the people who are coming forward to take care of the earth. And the fact that that hoop is healing is becoming a more widespread tradition. But for many tribes in this area, there are 4 sacred plants, and they are sweetgrass, tobacco, cedar, and sage. And in the Southwest, corn pollen is used instead of sweetgrass because it doesn't grow there. But for Native people, it's important to begin special events, even the day, with a blessing with sacred medicines. And we heard a little bit at the very beginning about the land near Pope Farms. And the Conservancy has been farmed and hunted on and cared for over 12,000 years. The Paleo Indians were the first people to have lived here between 6,500 and 800 BC. And that's when the archaic Indians lived in this area, and they were hunters and gatherers. The Ho-Chunk people were mound builders, and they lived throughout this land on the shores of Lake Mendota and Monona until they were forcibly removed in the 1840s, and they were sent west of the Mississippi, some as far as Nebraska. But interestingly enough, many of the Ho-Chunks walked back home. And I think I know somebody, he said his family was sent away 3 times and they just kept coming back because this was their land and they couldn't leave it. Native peoples introduced wide agriculture. I think that's really important for you to know. 70% of all the foods we eat today were originally native plants. And the garden here at Pope Farms was planned to represent what a native garden looked like 1,000 years ago. I haven't been out to see it, but you can bet I'm coming once I read that fact. There's a story of the 3 sisters that many of you may be familiar with, but at a point in time, the people were starving. And 3 sisters came and said they would feed the people. They would feed them by turning themselves into corn, beans, and squash. And you plant the corn stalk, and you always plant it with fish because fish oil is so good for growing plants. And then you plant the beans around it, and the beans use the corn stalk as a pole to grow. And you plant the squashes away from the late afternoon sun because that's when it gets too hot for the squash. And that is a perfect nitrogen cycle. That does not ever need to be fertilized. But when settlers came, they looked at that and said, that's not efficient. You plant things in rows and you harvest them all at once. And so we have to fertilize every year because it uses up so many of the nitrates in the soil. Much of the surrounding land was occupied by the peoples who lived and farmed in this area, and they created sacred sites. My husband and I belong to Holy Wisdom Monastery, and it sits on a sacred space recognized by the Native Americans many years ago. And there are indigenous peoples' burial mounds on that land. and their legacy is honored and embraced as part of the ecumenical philosophy of the group. At Edgewood, where I teach, there are actually 14 intact mounds, including a 120-foot bird mound on campus right in front of the library, which is roped off so nobody walks on it. And there are 2 sacred springs on campus when you go down to Lake Wingra. But the interesting story about that, I learned the first time I went on a walk of the mounds with John Leonard, one of the teachers there. When Edgewood, Kathy, I'm looking at your bird, he's beautiful. She has a parrot on her shoulder if anybody can see it. When the college was built, there was only one sacred spring. And if you walk the mounds, there was a panther mound, and the tradition is that a panther mound always points to water, and it didn't. It just pointed to nothing. But when they built the science building, they put in rain gardens all over the campus. And don't you know, the second sacred spring emerged, and the panther mound pointed toward it, which to me is just amazing. I always love that story. The work that I do and the people that I have come to know have changed my life. For the years I taught Native American spirituality at Dominican, I took students 15 times to South Dakota and Montana, to the reservations out there. They were incredible trips. We camped for 15 days. We drove sometimes 4,400 miles. We visited tribes. And I would call sometime in early or late November, December, or early January and find out what the tribes were doing. And I had the fortune to meet a woman named Bonnie Sechatella Sawyer, who runs a thing called Hopa Mountain. And they have NSF grants, National Science Foundation grants, that funds the teacher's salary for 5 junior high science teachers, and they collaborate on projects. So once I connected with her, it was great because I would just find out what they were teaching. I would ask the Field Museum or people from other agencies to come and teach us how to do what they were doing out on the reservations, what the students were doing. And then my students would create lesson plans and little booklets for the kids to bring out. And we would work with the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades out at the Blackfoot Reservation. We also worked at Pine Ridge, but mostly we had a space at the Blackfoot Reservation that we could use on their land trust. We did that for 15 years and learned so many things. One year, this was my favorite story that I learned. I won't tell you all of them because I could go on all day. But Bonnie had brought microscopes and big bins to get water from the glacial pots and from the springs that they had there. And we looked for microinvertebrates, little animals that you had to use a microscope to see. And we counted them because the number of microinvertebrates tells you the health of the water. So our kids were just loving this and working with these little 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders. They were having a wonderful time. We also played games that were water games. We did a lot of other things, but that particular science thing was really fun for me. And at the end of it, our kids picked up these bins and they were going to dump them. Well, the 5th graders said to them, you can't do that. We have to thank the animals. So they took the bins back to the water and they said a prayer in Blackfoot. And then they carefully put the microinvertebrates back in the water, thanking them for allowing us to study them. And that was 20 years ago. And I have never forgotten what I learned from that moment. To be thankful to microinvertebrates is just a concept I would never have had. And I'm so grateful that I learned it. It changed how I understand caring for the water. 7 years ago, Neil and I retired and moved full-time to Lodi. And one of the best things about living here has been to be so close to the reservations, which allows me to spend more time with my teachers and my friends up there, and to bring students. I've kind of outgrown the ability to do a 4,000-mile, 15-day camping trip. That was wonderful when I was a little younger, but it's a little too hard now. But I can get to northern Wisconsin, and I've taken kids for years up there. And one of the things we learn about is how to care for the earth when we are with the people. Many of you know about the Midday Lodge, the Anishinaabe Healing Lodge, and there are several in North America. And there's one which many of my friends belong to, and it's led by Chief Eddie Benton Benet. In 2001, he started talking about the dangers to the water, the importance of water. You can live 30 days without food, but you can only live 4 days without water. And if we don't take care of the water, we are all going to be in a lot of trouble. And so he started talking about all the things that were endangering them. When the first pilgrims came to the shore, they were astounded that Native people could drink from the streams. They had not been able to drink from the water in Europe for hundreds of years. That's why they all drank beer and mead and ale, because they could not drink from the water. And then they brought that gift here, and now we can't drink from lakes and streams anymore either. People in Europe didn't understand how to keep from polluting the water, but water here was very pure. And there have been many prophecies about white people coming from the east and the changes that they would bring. And the chief that day was talking about some of the prophecies, like the black snakes, which we have come to understand as the pipelines. I work with Wisconsin Safe Energy to try to rein in the pipeline companies whose spills and whose fracking has really endangered our water in many, many ways. But at the end of his talk, he asked this question: what are you going to do about it? And then he sent everybody from the lodge out to pray. One of the people that day was a grandmother. Her name was Josephine Mandaman. And she said, I will walk for the water. And so that spring, she took off with a copper pail of water, they call that the little boy, and an eagle staff, all by herself, and walked the circumference of Lake Superior, which is an incredible thing. It took her 7 months, and she did it. Camping, walking, occasionally stopping with friends, but every day she'd pick up her pail and she'd walk further. And as she walked, it was kind of like Forrest Gump. Remember from the movie where he starts running and he's all by himself, and then people join in for whatever reasons, they're inspired to join him. There have been thousands of water walks since her first walk. The next year she walked Lake Michigan, and then she walked all of the Great Lakes. And then she walked the St. Lawrence Seaway. I guess she likes walking. But the last walk she did was the reverse order from the ocean of the St. Lawrence Seaway to the Great Lakes. That was the last walk she took at 83 on a walker. And I've walked with her, and I want to tell you, I can't keep up with her. That woman she was an energized bunny. And she earned the title Water Walker. And since then, many groups across the United States, South America, Africa, Australia are all following her example to pray for and bless the water. And her spirit walked 3 years ago, but her legacy will live forever. And I work with many of the women, many of the grandmothers who are water walkers. and whose chief role in life is to care for our water. And they walk the water and bless it so that you and I will have water, so that our children and our grandchildren will have water in the future. Each one of us in our own way can participate in that blessing. Neil and I have lived on Lake Wisconsin, and it has been a privilege to wake up each morning and see the water. One of the things I do when it's a little warmer than it has been this last week is to go down to the water and put my feet in and bless the four directions and pray for the water. I often sing a song to the water. It's called the Nibi Song, and I learned it up at a lodge up north. Nibi means water, and Megwich means thank you. And the song is Nibi Gije Geagu, Jimmy Gwich Winamigu, Gizi Wanigu. I don't have a good voice, but the water seems to like it. And I urge you, when you're near the water, sing to the water, talk to the water, because water has memory, and it will remember you. It will remember you. It will remember the water. It will remember your words. The hardest part about moving tomorrow is leaving the water. But there are enough lakes in Middleton and Madison that I'll be able to get to see water. I'm not too concerned. One of the women in that lodge, her name is Mary Ellen Baker. She's an Anishinaabe healer. And she is a woman who follows her dreams. About 35 years ago, she had a dream to build a lodge, a healing lodge, where people in recovery could come and experience healing and be changed, if you will, or become themselves again. And it took her 27 years to earn the money, to buy the pieces of land from her relatives, and to finally build this lodge. But she had a number of miracle stories as she did it. Someday you have to have her come and talk to you about her dreams. But she built that lodge. And then it came out of a dream, the design of the lodge. She was at a teaching lodge, and there were Native women, and they were singing, and they were laughing, and they were playing. Children were playing. And she saw a path, and she followed it around this A-frame house. And she went around front, and she saw white women and Asian women and Black women crying. So she turned around and she went back and she said, "Women, you have to come and help your sisters." And that has been what she's been doing for the last 30 years, is helping all of us, white, Black, Asian, Native, to become women together, to work for the water. And she has a symposium that she does every August. This year was a little different because of the COVID. They could only have 20 people in the lodge. The lodge seats about 150 people. But to care for the water, to care about the water, to teach us how to do it, and to teach us the Anishinaabe way of doing that. And I'm hoping next summer we'll be able to be all there together again. This year and last year, I've been teaching a course at Edgewood, advocating for the earth and water in the Native tradition. Last year was a wonderful experience. I got to take students to Lac to Lac de Flambeau, to Bad River, and to the Menominee and Ho-Chunk lands. And they got to learn a lot. The Menominee people are foresters, and they have an incredible forest that has the same amount of board feet 90 years after they started, because they forest responsibly and sustainably. And people come from all over the world to learn their forestry practices. And our students learned a great deal when we went. This year was much harder to do because all the reservations closed down, as they should. People are not allowed to come, and they're trying very hard to keep their people healthy, because most reservations are in resort areas that colonists have taken over And I've brought COVID up there. There wasn't any for the longest time, but there is now. Everywhere I go, I realize that if we had only listened, if we had only learned when we first encountered the Native people, we would have had a much more ecologically friendly world. But today, we are entering into dialogue, Native and other people, in a way that never happened before. Many Natives want to help us learn about their medicines. That's some of the talks that happen at Women in Water Coming Together with Mary Ellen in the summer. They want us to learn traditions so that we can all work together to heal the world. And so I would invite all of you to go to our website, which is real easy, www.spiritofthewater.org. www.spiritofthewater.org, and join us in this healing. If all of us take care of the earth will respond to us in ways that we will be healed. So I see that there are some chat questions, and I don't know if this would be an appropriate time, but I think I've been talking a long time. I need a sip of water.
I think this is a great time. We have a couple of questions in the chat box. One has to do with the impact of COVID on Native Americans that you know, both here, you had mentioned South Dakota and other lands, and if you could share what you know about the impact.
Yeah. One of the things about the people here in the woodlands is there are great resources, great medicines. In Wisconsin alone, we have 384 medicine plants. It could be the bulb, it could be the corm, the bark, the berry, the leaf. It could be all different seasons that they would be medicines, but the Native people in the Medea Lodge know them all. And so they have been doctoring themselves, if you will. Whenever people get together, they line the place with cedar, because cedar will heal viruses. And everything is done with a sage blessing. Sage is also a healing herb, and sweetgrass is also a healing herb. And we burn that all the time. And when you purify or smudge a room with sage, it kills most of the bacteria in the room, most of the viruses in the room. It isn't permanent, but because they've been doing that all this time, people are doing well unless they come into contact. A lot of them work in restaurants, and the tourists have not behaved responsibly when they go to the reservations. So yes, there is COVID in our reservations, but not a lot because of the knowledge of medicines that people have. There's a lot in the towns around them, so people are kind of hunkered down like I am. Our son is a nurse, and he quarantined us in February and said, you are not going to do this or this or this, and we haven't, because we don't want to get sick. It's a horrible, horrible disease. And the Southwest tribes have a lot of COVID. And part of the reason is there's no water. This is something you might want to look up online. There's a woman in the Navajo reservation. She's called the Water Lady. And she drives a bus all day, and then she delivers water to the parts of the areas of the reservation that have no water. A third of the people on the Navajo reservation, the Dene reservation, do not have running water. A third of the people. And we know this. The reservations that have great poverty, they are experiencing a lot more disease because they don't have the natural resources that the woodland people have. In fact, the cosmologies of the tribes that have scarcity of resources and medicines is a little darker and a little more different than the stories that you'll hear here in the Great Lakes, where we have food that grows on water, the wild rice, where we have plentiful medicines, where a lot of cedar, a lot of sage. So yeah, those are very different. And I haven't been able to take my students. I had to do everything online with them, and it kind of breaks my heart but I've told some of them to go down to the Pope Conservancy because it is open. They could at least walk the trails and read the signs. So several of them are going to do that. They have to do 2 field trips for me. And since I can't take them, I know the Aldo Leopold Foundation has videos that they can watch and learn from. But it just kind of breaks my heart that they can't go and be there. Last year, we not only went to the Menominee, but we went to the Ho-Chunk territories and we learned how to call wolves late at night. That was fun. And, you know, we were able to learn things from elders, and that is not something they're able to do. I'm just praying next year's a little different. It's been really hard, and I don't want to keep telling them all the wonderful things they're missing, but we are all missing wonderful things because we did not respond well to this pandemic.
Yeah, I think we all agree with you.
It was a long answer to a short question. Sorry.
There's 2 other questions. One is they would like to know the name of the original water walker, and then also the name of the dreamer who built the lodge.
Okay. Josephine Mandamin, Mandamin. You will find her on Facebook. She's so lovely. And she's just a very quiet spoken woman. I have the privilege of having met her several times, and she just was lovely. And so Josephine Mandamin is,
walker.
yeah, and my teacher, Mary Ellen Baker, she's my sister really. She is at La Coudray Reservation, and she built the lodge, and it is her website, www.spiritofthewater.org. And if you go to that website, you'll hear her stories.
For Josephine's last name, could you
Mandamin, Mandamin.
M-I-N, okay.
And Baker's pretty easy. We can all do Baker. But Mary Ellen is one word. So remember that when you're looking her up.
That's it for the questions in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Well, that's it for me too. You gave me 45 minutes and I've taken a little longer than that, but it has been a pleasure to be with you today, and I will come over and see the garden. I know it's kind of reaching the end of its productivity. My gardens are anyway. Oh, Jack.
Yes. My wife and I would like to know how you sign up to take your class.
It's a college class at Edgewood College, but I am thinking of doing something else when this pandemic is over. I'm 75 and I'm at the end of my teaching, I think.
Okay.
I've retired once, and then I came up here and I got started again because I love this. I love this teaching about the earth. I think we have to do that. And your work at the Conservancy is so beautiful. I know many people have learned many wonderful things about the earth from you, but I would like to do more of this as a teaching experience and have my friends come and teach with me. And so I think that's what I'm going to do rather than a $3,000 college course. I'd rather do something. They're going to let me do this at Holy Wisdom. So that's how I will do it.
We could contact Holy Wisdom.
Well, when it's not done yet, it's just beginning, because we are in quarantine as well, Jack.
Right.
They do, if you're a member, you can see the liturgy on Sunday online, but nothing compares to community. You know that.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping when we are able to open up again, that I will be able to do this. And if they would allow me to do online things, I would do them as well. So my husband's on the board. They might let me.
Kathy,
Yes,
we
Sharon.
would love for you to do something at Pope Farm.
I would too. And it'll happen. It'll happen.
Can I ask a question before we go?
Sure.
I'm really fascinated by this land ownership thing, and as we were listening to on the screen is a picture of Pope Farm where there's this rock wall, which is one of our sort of identifying features. Well, the wall speaks to people owning the land and separating the boundaries between my land and your land.
Yeah.
So my question is, did the Native American people, at least the ones in the tribes you're familiar with, not own things in general, that they didn't need to claim things for themselves?
Yeah.
I mean,
it really was, you know, and it's hard to make generalizations, as you know, because people had different ways of being. But as far as ownership of the land, oh, here's our dog Montana. She always comes, she opened the door. So it's okay. We're at the end. So anyway, there she is. People did not own land until we divided it up and gave them 160 acres. That's when land ownership became a way of being. Otherwise, tribes understood that the land belonged to them in that they were allowed to live there. The Creator gave it to them to care for. A very different way of understanding land ownership. And I'll tell you a little story about fences. One of my really good friends on the Blackfoot Reservation, his name is Chewing Blackbones, which is one of the most ancient native Blackfoot names. He used to ride a horse from the glacier to Helena and never see a fence. They did not happen until ranchers started enclosing their land.
So did Native American people own, quote, own other things, or did they just not own things in general?
Well, you had your own clothes, you had your own teepee, you had your own whatever, but I'll tell you a little story. There's a tradition of giveaway. So when there would be a feast or there would be a major event like a marriage, people would give away everything they had. They just lay it all out and people would go through it.
Potlatch with it?
Well, in the Northwest, yes, it was called potlatch, but here it was just called a giveaway. And so when Neil and I were moving, and we had a number of things since we're going to a tinier house, we invited all our neighbors to come and take stuff. And some did, but the rest of it went to St. Vinny's. You didn't, it's just a different understanding of possessions.
Right.
I think one of the problems with our culture is our possessions possess us.
Yeah, that's so true.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Are there any other final questions for Kathy? If not, you all for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's been such fun to be with you. I wish I could see your faces now. I won't talk anymore and you can show me who you are.
Thank you. And I should have said when I introduced you that you're moving, because otherwise it looks like your house has been ransacked.
I know. The movers are coming tomorrow at 8 a.m. So we have about 4 more hours of work to do before we can sit down tonight and cry.
And she didn't know when she agreed to October 4th that she was going to be moving October 5th.
I did not know. But you know what? We're nothing if not flexible.
Well, thank you so much.
God bless you, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Patricia. We'll make it. We'll get there. And God bless you all. Thank you for the work you do for the land. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.